This week on the Authentic Media Podcast.
People need to understand that business isn't life. Business is to help us get what we most desire in life.
If your business is not scaling, you don't have a scalable problem, you have a leadership problem.
That's right. Are you leader by position or are you a leader by people wanting to follow you?
Right.
Two very different things. You do not plant and harvest in the same season. But what I find most of the times is how impatient people are.
Right.
Because once they catch the vision, then they try to shortcut.
Yeah.
And that's where they get themselves and their team in trouble. All right, so here we are. We're in Danielle's podcast studio, but it's going to be as if it's my podcast.
Yeah.
In reality, it's kind of still both of our podcasts, right? So Danielle and I are trying to figure out how do we do this? How do we jam? Because we just got done doing one for you, right? And on your channels, which I'll put on my channels anyway. And then we're doing the one for me on my channels. And so we're figuring this out.
Yeah.
Right. And we're having fun doing it. And so we both want to have different messages that we're sharing and things that we're working on. And so I'm gonna go through things that I believe, and this is something that I coach and train all over the country. So I've been business coaching and consulting for over 20 years, which is really weird. Considering I'm only 20 years old, so at heart. So it's really strange, to feel like that I'm 46 years old, but man, it's just been a wild ride. I feel extremely blessed to be able to impact on so many people. Until recently, we just got done talking about being out there on the internet, having a digital presence. Yeah. I've had zero digital presence until about 2 months ago, when I started listening. I'm like, Danielle, we're pushing each other out of our comfort zones. Danielle's like, you got to be out there. You got to be out there. You get out there. I'm like, oh, this is exhausting to learn all this stuff. And so I've been learning. And so really, this is part of that. This is me starting my own podcast. Yep. You and I jamming on a podcast. Me going into understanding how to create social media content, me using AI to produce all this stuff. Yeah. All that so that, like I just said something before we got on, and maybe people have heard this before, but if a tree falls in the woods and nobody is around, does it make a sound?
Right.
So we can go out and be doing great things for great people, but if we are not using the stewardship, which means taking our natural gifts and abilities and talents, if we're not using that and we're not amplifying it out there in the digital world so that people actually know how we can serve them best, then are we being a good steward with what we've been put on this earth to do? Right?
It's good.
Yeah. So just telling everybody, I've business coaching, been doing for so long, for about over 20 years. I've been doing keynote speeches. I've been doing, so I'm a speaker. I've had multiple people ask me because of the stuff I post online. Yeah. And then occasionally they catch a clip and then people are like, are you a motivational speaker? And I'm like, I'm a business coach, but I get really excited talking about the things that I talk about. So I think maybe that's why they're like, well, you're very motivational. And my goal is to just help people where they're at, get them to think different about what they're thinking about, whether it's businesses, whether it's corporations, whether it's people in there. Yeah. But it's to get people to change their behavior to be able to make an impact how they want to make an impact in their personal and professional life. Yeah. And I do that through business coaching. I do that through speaking, and I do that through training. So that's...
Yeah, he does all the things.
I do. And then Danielle and I are talking again, and I'm like... She'd asked me, 6 months ago, she's like, yeah, but what do you do? What is your one thing you do? And I'm like, Danielle, I can do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. Yeah. But as her and I have both been on, I would say, aligned journeys or paths, but not the same path, is that we've both learned the things that we need to learn at the right time or hear differently from a different person that says, okay, got it, right? So check. Yeah. And so... me specializing more or less in what I'm doing for the business coaching, speaking, which I'm like, okay, I'll do more of the speaking. When I do it well. I have great reviews. I'm like, so I looked at it as prompting. When other people tell you this is what you do well, you've got to pay attention to that. Yeah. And then team training is something that I love to do because, again, I like to see people start a day. Like when I'm doing a full day of team training, when I see them start a day in one way where they're like this to end up at the end of the day when sometimes there's tears, sometimes they're asking questions, sometimes they're like, how do I follow you on social media? And at that time, I'm like, I don't really
have social media. Which we're working on.
We're getting better at. So
definitely.
So that's like, it's my podcast. Danielle is going to interview me kind of like I'm going to say things and talk about things.
She's here for fun.
And she's here for fun. Yeah. And she's going to creatively ask me questions.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think when you and I are talking to whoever it may be, our audience is like, we know what we're talking about or we know what we're saying, but sometimes our audience needs that clarification.
Yeah, definitely. Of like who we are and like what we do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I mean, so really Anthony and I go way back like a couple years. And so we have been on this, like you said, just similar journey of like trying to figure out what is it that we can do and like how do we amplify it in this digital world, because it's always changing, right? And so like I love how our text messages are just like filled with like, hey, check out this tool, check this out. And it's just like, this is just the beginning of what is going to be monumental.
That is. It's going to be
so
fun.
I'm super excited to like be here and get to know, really not even get to know you, but to like help package how people can understand like what you do out offline and why it matters. And so we can definitely get into, just essentially like business coaching, because I think whether you believe it or not, we just had a podcast about, personal branding and figuring out who you are. So definitely have to check out that episode. But essentially we've talked about the best way to like really like niche who you are is like figure out all the things that you do and like how do you package it, right? And so we can maybe like simply identify like business coaching as your thing, and then in that is like all of these different pillars and avenues. Even though business coaching is so broad, like this episode is specifically going to help people understand what you do and why you do it and why it's so important.
Yeah. So we'll go over concepts.
Yeah.
Right. Because like if I was going to do business coaching in a podcast, like every business is different, just like an owner would be. So they've all got their essentially business personality profile.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody has their individual needs. Right. And so I like to start high level just with like, I want people to create agreement with some concepts that I believe are important. Yeah. Okay. And so the number one concept that I share with businesses right when I first work with them, because I want to understand what they're thinking, because not all businesses will want to work with me. And I'm okay with that. Just like you and I talked about, I don't need to be here to serve everybody. I'm not here to serve everybody. I'm here to serve the people that align. Right.
Yeah.
And so I heard this concept called wealth windows, and I absolutely love the concept. And so when I was like, like I got to share this with everybody. So I've been sharing it with everybody. And so in wealth windows, it talks about money, how to think about money differently.
Yeah.
Okay. And how about earning money, whether it's through as employment, whether it's through self-employment, whether it's through how we think about business, whatever it may be. And so let me take you through this. And so if you want to imagine that I'm going to draw. Hey, maybe you can edit. Maybe you can edit this.
Edit the windows.
Yeah. So there's a window here. If you guys want to imagine this, like over the bottom left, there's this guy, and this guy looks at money, and his name is Hodge. Okay, has a job.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the issue with Hodge is that he has usually, these aren't laws, right? These are principles. So usually an employment, so has a job, has less time, flexibility and freedom, and has less money, flexible and income than they would typically have.
Yeah.
Right? Because they are working for somebody else.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And so what ends up happening is some of the people in this quadrant, they think, well, I want more time and I want more money. So what they do is they come over here into this next quadrant. That quadrant that guy's name is Oj, owns a job.
Yeah.
And I want to be really clear with what that means, because what ends up happening is people go, well, I own my own business. Yeah. And I ask them, is that true? And they go, well, yeah, it's called this. I'm like, okay, it's called that.
Yeah.
So my next question is always, can you leave your business for a month and it still makes money? And I will tell you, the majority of them say, what do you think?
No.
No.
Yeah.
So you don't own a business, you own a job. And more or less, you are an employee
Of your job.
Right? One of the few.
Yeah.
Right? And what you did essentially is you fired or let go of one boss. And now you have many bosses in your customers and maybe your employees.
Yeah.
And I shared this with a local business owner and he goes, oh my gosh. He goes, my employees own me.
Yeah.
Like I work for them.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes. And so that's the biggest realization in any entrepreneur or business, because here's the deal is that people need to understand that like business isn't life.
Right.
Business is to help us get what we most desire in life. And so if you want to look at the one thing that I really dive down in helping business owners do or directors or CEOs, it's helping them design a personal and professional life that helps them maximize and live the life that they desire.
Right.
That's what I do, but I do it through different channels, right?
Yeah.
And so usually when I'm talking to these businesses down here, I'm like, listen, what would it look like to think differently about how to think about business and how to do business? And they're like, okay, what does that mean?
Right.
Well, there's a graduation level. So you graduate from owning a job and you move up here. And this over here is, this guy's person is OAS. So we call him Oz.
Yeah.
That person is own a system. Okay. Now here's the caveat is when you own a system or you're building a system, a lot of times in business, it takes a lot of time investment and some money investment to build that system.
Right.
And so your effort on a scale may be way up here. And you know about this, like when you're trying to build out, like we're doing this right now.
Right.
Trying to build out systems. So way up here, and your income is closest to the 0 mark. But your effort and intensity is up here.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is over time, with consistent effort and intensity, it moves. So now all of a sudden, the system or your effort and intensity come down here and your income is up here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing to convince business owners to do or to convince people to think differently how they think, is that they may make less money in the meantime, but they're building something that's going to provide them income time and time again. And it doesn't require them to have to always be at the business.
Right. Because essentially we want to create financial freedom and wealth.
That's right.
So we can walk away for a little bit.
That's right.
And not having to be enslaved to, oh, I have to work so I can make money.
Right. So people tell me, they'll say, well, I can't take vacation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you mean you can't take vacation? Well, I just can't afford it. What do you mean you can't afford it? Well, I can't afford to be gone because if I'm gone, I can't do blah, 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 whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
I said, it's not that you can't, it's just you choose not to. And then they're like, what do you, okay, what? I'm like, it's not that you can't, you can, because I know it's possible because I've coached people how to do it. So it's not a can't issue. It is a choice issue. And now that you're aware that you have a choice to make, you now can ask different questions on how to build the system.
Right.
Right? Because otherwise what you do is you build for lack of better terms, you might, to make the point is you make a money prison. You become dependent, or that business becomes dependent on you being there, and now you're locked in prison with golden handcuffs. So you may be making great income,
right? And
maybe that's the life you design, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm not here for those people. I'm here for the people that want to create a commercial and profitable enterprise that works without them. That is the place to be, right? So then after you're making money up in this quadrant, what ends up happening is you graduate to the next quadrant where you start to look at, and I don't spend a ton of time talking about this with business owners, but it's ones where they start taking the income they're earning over here and they invest it in other things. That could be real estate, could be investments, it could be all kinds of different things over here, because I want people to understand the worst income that you can live off of right now is earned income. It's the highest taxable wage, okay? So how do we get off of the earned income and just live off our investment income? Right. And so that's where I want people and business owners to graduate through these things, or to understand how to move through that to create, again, that personal and professional life that they desire and can maximize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And remind me the 4 quadrants, what do you call this? And how do you like help people graduate there? Because it seems like we work so hard, obviously, to get the business going, right? Like in the beginning, you're like hustling. You're like, okay, got to get it going. And some people are like, I can't imagine myself walking away for a month or a couple weeks because I have families to feed. I have people that are working underneath me. And it's like a part of them sometimes feels guilty in a way. They're responsible.
Right.
But there's a way that you said that like, you don't have to be guilty.
Not at all.
This is like, we can get you here without you feeling guilty.
Right.
And how do you get them there?
Absolutely. Well, it's usually it goes through, like I do a personal and professional or a business alignment. And it's to understand, number one, what they want in life. And number two, how does business help them get that most in life? That's every interaction starts that way.
Yeah.
Right? Because some people may not want to take 12 weeks of vacation.
Right.
Right? They may want to take 4. And they're like, dude, if I could just take 1, like I will be winning. Great. Well, let's focus on 1 and then 3 next year, whatever it may be. So serve people where they're at. But then it's diving down and analyzing where are their operations, where's their administration, what does their team look like, what does their current income look like? Yeah. Is the income based upon them making sales or them doing a thing? So then it's saying, okay, well, how do we take what their genius is, get them focused on that, and then get them either leveraged into other people who have the similar genius that they can bring into their business that can do that type of work so they don't have to all the time, right? But that takes time.
Yeah.
Like when I'm helping people do this stuff, it's not like, oh yeah, we sat down and had this conversation, we drew it on a piece of paper, we did a 90-day plan and it's done.
Yeah.
Right. It's more like a step-by-step process.
Right.
I would say usually it takes anywhere between 12 to 18 months for people to really see the impact of the planning. Because I'll share this with you is that you do not plant and harvest in the same season. But what I find most of the times is how impatient people are.
Right.
Because once they catch the vision, then they try to shortcut.
Yeah.
And that's where they get themselves and their team, their employees in trouble when they're shortcutting the system.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying, well, Anthony, sure, whatever. I'm sure you can help me, like whatever, right? I'm saying, well, it's not tomorrow.
Right.
Right. But if we build the system over the next 12 to 18 months, I know that I can help you do it. Like people want to try to argue. I don't need people to argue with me. I've just seen it. I've done it. I've helped people in all kinds of different things.
And I think sometimes people feel like, this is just another thing I don't want to add on. I already have my business. I already have like my people I need to be responsible for. And I hope that every business owner understands that like you said, anything that you plant, you're not going to get it tomorrow. It takes time. And I'm hoping like within the first 2-3 years, like that's what they say, like the most hardest businesses are figuring out life, figuring out business. Like it takes time for you to actually become sustainable. Right. But it's like, talk about what would happen if you keep avoiding what's hurting you.
You're going to get burned out. I mean, that's where I've seen that happen over and over and over, is that people mentally, physically, they don't take care of themselves. I mean, you look at the healthcare industry and you look at nurses. Nurses as a group of people, and doctors as a group of people, a lot of them are one of the and I've heard, this is what nurses have told me, they are one of the most unhealthy groups in the United States. Why? Because they have spent so much time serving, because it's their heart, serving all these other people, that they've emptied their cup. And so what ends up happening is they don't take time to fill their cup. And so it causes burnout, it causes resentment, it causes mental anguish, depression, anxiety, all those things is a result of not being intentionally about planning your day, your month, your year, and your life. So clarity.
Right. And how important is clarity?
Clarity is key. Clarity is confidence. If you don't have clarity in what you're trying to, they say that it's, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Right. And that's true. And that's what I find with a lot of folks is they're like, either they make up goals. They're like, oh, we should do this much in revenue or that. And I'm like, well, how'd you get that? Well, we just picked it. Okay, so there's no what I call KPIs, key performance indicators, like who's doing the work, who's making the sales, who's your admin that's handling this stuff. And they're like, I didn't think about that. I'm like, man, you're sitting on like a 10 times business.
Yeah.
Like I had this conversation with the business just on Wednesday. And we were talking about at the beginning of the year, or I'd say towards the end of last year, their first goals was to do like, I don't know, it was like 267,000 maybe in revenue, right? And I'm like, okay, if we do this, and this thing, I said, I'm pretty sure that if we do these things, we do this thing here, we do this thing here, that by October, so next month, I'm pretty sure that you guys could hit $500,000 in revenue.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, just be patient.
Yeah.
Trust me. Follow the steps. And guess what they did last month? 495.
Wow.
495.
Yeah.
Not 500,000.
Right.
But 495.
Yeah.
I'm like, who didn't stay till midnight to get some stuff done to get to 500?
Exactly.
Yeah. But anyways, that's a whole nother funny story. But they didn't know that there's money that they don't know that's coming in until after the month close.
Right.
So some of that money came in, which pushed them that close.
Yeah.
But that's the importance of it right there is like being clear. But we did the planning over a year ago with the steps that needed to happen.
Hey there, quick question for you. Have you ever thought to yourself, you want to launch a podcast, but you think the podcasting industry is oversaturated? Well, you're right. But did you know that the podcasting industry is worth over $37 billion? So if you don't have a podcast right now, honey, you are leaving money on the table. Having a podcast is the perfect opportunity to showcase your expertise, connect with your ideal clients, and elevate your brand and your business. This is why I created the Podcast Blueprint. In just 7 days, you'll learn how to launch a podcast from scratch. That's right, in just 7 days, you'll be able to go live. So if you're interested, go ahead and find that link down below. In the meantime, let's get back to today's episode.
Okay, so we're like just getting started here, but I know another important key factor here when you're talking with businesses is economic value, right? Talk to me about why that's important and like what are they not really like understanding when it comes to that?
Sure. So there is this concept that I picked up that's called the economic value ladder. Okay. And so the first step in the economic value ladder is all about the doing. What do you do? Okay.
Yeah.
And so when we look at the doing or the implementation, that is what people are going to get paid the least at.
Yeah.
And what I find is when I'm talking to people, whether they're business owners or whether just people working at a job, and they're like, well, I want to get paid more. I'm like, well, you're doing the doing. And they're like, but I don't understand. Like, I'm supposed to get doing the doing. I'm like, that's fine that you're doing the doing, you're doing the implementation, but just understand that the next step up in the economic value ladder is actually unity. So that's why, like, I would say that owners or business managers or directors get paid more than the people that are doing.
Right.
So it's a step up in the economic value ladder. But what most people do is not, I mean, when I got this and I understood like what my gifts are and my abilities, I graduated out of the implementation and I graduated out of the unity. I'm still there when some things that I do, but I graduated into there's a line that supercharges your income, whether you're a person, a business owner, professional, whatever, is communication. And so if you get your communication down and you start rocking that out in such a way that you're learning how to talk better, you're learning how to email better, you're learning how to text better, you're learning you're learning how to get a point across better, is that will pay you 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 times more than the unity level. Right. However, what I find is that most people spend their time at the implementation and the unity, but they want to get paid like they're at the communication level. Right. But they don't want to work on the communication. Right. Because they're like, no, I just want to get paid at this level. Or I hear a lot of people say it must be nice. And I'm like, well, if it must be nice, then go do the work to become this. Right. I've worked with so many companies where maybe there's a sales team. What do sales people do? They what? They communicate, right? So I have admin teams that are like, well, that must be nice that they're getting paid. And I said, that's no problem. I said, you can interview for the team, right? So you can interview for that team. And they're like, well, I don't want to do that. I don't like it. So then don't be expected to pay like you were a sales professional, right? Or that you're at the communication level. And that's fine. That's okay, right? But then the max level of economic value is imagination and vision. And that right there will again. Oh, yeah. So like if you can see it.
That's good.
And you can vision it and then you can communicate it to the people.
Yeah.
That's what's going to set you apart from anybody.
Right.
And so when I'm talking to people, like a business owner, I just had this conversation last week.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, you guys, I said, listen, and these are in this specific trait, this is a dentist I'm talking to. Okay. So dentists can earn a very good living, very, very good income at the implementation phase.
Yeah.
However, what I taught them is I said, listen, you can come up to the communication and vision phase. You can grow from a practice to 5 practices.
Right.
You can move, instead of being a practitioner all the time, you can move into a visionary and communication and coaching phase inside your business. You can have other dentists come in and do the implementation. You can hire directors to be your unity people, your office managers.
Right.
That will grow your wealth and income exponentially. Anywhere usually between 5 to 8 times their valuation by making that transition.
Yeah.
And so that's the important of people understanding that to fire themselves as quickly as possible from implementation as fast as possible. You and I were just talking at our first podcast today. You and I were talking about like you essentially firing yourself from you doing editing on your podcast. And I said, right. Because what does Danielle do well?
Right.
She has vision and she communicates. But if she's spending, if you have time in a day or you have, let's say you have 80% of your time is spent on editing. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
You're not spending 80% of your time on creating vision and communicating. You're spending it on and you click, right? And I'm like
the lowest
value of economic value. And you're like, man, I've got this value. Like, how do I provide such value that I get paid for it? I'm like, Danielle, then quit doing the editing crap. Like you asked me, you're like, well, I could teach you how to edit. This is like a month ago or whatever. I'm like,
and you're like, no,
I don't get paid to edit videos. That's not my job.
Yeah.
Right. My job is to encourage, is to build, is to create behavior change, is to implement strategies, to implement tactics to grow people and businesses. Again, going all the way back to helping business owners get what they want.
Yeah. And I think it's like a process that we all have to like get through because like I said, in the beginning, I mentioned that every business owner and company goes through a space of like survival, right? Where you have to like do everything and figure everything out until you can get people in places. But it sounds like even when we're talking about economic value, that like even business owners and companies, it sounds like they get to a space where they're comfortable, they are producing, they're scaling a little bit, but there's still some like blind spots, like, you know what I mean? So it always sounds like that companies and businesses need business advisors essentially, because like you're going to come in and you're going to expose like the blind spots and like what they're not seeing.
That's right.
Because when you're so involved in it, and you don't have any other external or outsider perspective, like sometimes it's like you don't know what's killing you.
That's right. Yeah, coach operates and I would tell you that coaches operate in people's blind spots. Yeah. So people are like, are you a consultant? No.
Right.
A consultant tells you
what you should do.
A coach helps you.
Advises.
Right. A coach helps mentor you and to ask the right questions about what you should do.
Give suggestions, but at the end of the day, it's like you can do whatever you think is best for you.
Right.
But yes, I definitely love that. Okay, so after economic value, what's something else that you walk through with businesses that is super important?
All right. So when I say that I'm onboarding a new client, the number one thing they'll talk about is leadership. Is that your personal and professional life will only grow to your current level of leadership.
100%.
Right. And so they're like, well, my business won't grow. I said, well, then what have you been doing to grow? What are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you watching? Who are you hanging out with? And they're like,
goes back to you.
Yeah. What do you do in the evenings? What do you do in the mornings?
Yeah.
And they're like, I get up. You're like, there's no building into themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to look at John Maxwell's law of growth and his first law of leadership and combine those two things. Is that if we want more out of our business, then we've got to become more.
Yeah.
right? If we want more of their team, we've got to become more.
Yeah.
And I've said it like this before, is I have to become more
Right.
so that they can become more. And then I must become less so they can become more.
Yeah.
And people are like, I don't get that. Well, that goes back to a commercial and profitable enterprise that works without me, is I have to raise up my level of leadership to a point that other leaders are coming in up underneath me that can also lead the business.
Right.
Right. So I always tell businesses frequently is like, yeah, you might make a textile, or you might do AC, or you might do dentistry, you might do whatever these things are out there.
Yeah.
But if you change your mindset and you say, I am a leadership organization that does ... in your own mind and in your mantra and in your business, what ends up happening is people start to operate at a higher level of leadership, as long as they understand that it is all dependent on the leader. And owners frequently, well, I can't get blah, blah, blah to do whatever. I'm like, okay, well, why is that? What are you not communicating? What are you not communicating to yourself? What are you not communicating to others? How are you approaching people? And so I frequently see that there is a big disconnect between an ownership, director, CEO, whatever, their leadership and how they lead the team. Because I've had people go, well, my leaders just need to be better. And then my first question back to them is, what books have you read on leadership? None. What seminars have you been to? None. So then my question back to them is, then you focus on you. You go from a level 6 to a level 7. And then your leaders will see that and they'll duplicate what they see. Right? That's 100%. How that is how pivotal leadership is in every business and in life.
It's easy also to expose what's not a leader, as far as like, it's easy to be like, oh, I wish my leader was doing X, Y, and Z. But then it goes back to, if you are at any point trying to expose someone or telling somebody what they should do, like, you have to look internally. Like, you need to look at yourself within. It goes back to you. And what we've talked about earlier in our other podcast that you should go listen to, that everything starts with you. And if you don't understand who you are, and if you get out of this space of like the blame game of like, it's everyone else's fault and it's my employee's fault, it's the salesperson's fault, like, we didn't close this deal because X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, are your leaders and are your team, are they operating in the best value system that is gaining clients? And I think that's something like you have to ask yourself as a business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the transparency and authenticity you have to have with yourself. So I call it the leadership mirror. If your business and people aren't doing what you feel like they should be doing, you need to go look in the mirror. And what ends up happening is a lot of times it's a reflection of your own leadership. And that's leadership. And I do that too. Like if Evie and I, run a business together and we work with a team, and I'm like, well, if the team isn't doing X, Y, Z, then I don't say the team is this or the team is that. I say, what aren't we doing? What aren't we communicating? What aren't we being in order to elicit a response of them duplicating that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they could, like you said, essentially fill the gaps where the gaps are filled or needing to be filled, because it just goes back to like, you don't have a scalable problem, you have a leadership problem.
That's right.
So if your business is not scaling, then what are you doing as an individual and as a leader that is not scaling the business or scaling the team?
And a lot of times people will say, well, I'm a leader of a business. And so are you leader by position? Or are you a leader by people wanting to follow you? Two very different things.
100%.
I've been in a lot of situations where people like, I am a this or I'm a that or whatever. And they talk about their position. And I'm like, Like leadership has, like people have to follow, they follow you because they have to, not because they want to. And if you think that that is a good spot to be in, you are so wrong in your approach, right? And so my goal is to, and this is the reason why I don't work with everybody, is, but I have to have willing, I have to have coachable, right? And I have to have people that are accountable to building their leadership so that they can lead that business, that will lead their team, that will lead their life, that will lead their family and the experiences and everything and the legacy that they want to create.
And that keyword coachable always gives me chills. as far as like you have to be coachable, because if not, and if you're like walking around with earmuffs like there's nothing wrong with me, there's nothing wrong with my business, then okay, then you're happy with where you're at, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
But like you said, you already have identified the people and the businesses that you want to work with, and all of them are coachable.
Right. Yes. That's when I onboard a new client. It's like that way every time. I'm like, listen, man, or lady. Like, I'm like, let's talk. Let's see if we align. Let's just see if we jam together.
Yes.
And that's the way I approach all my clients, because I want to make sure that we're aligned in what they want and how I work with people.
Right.
Right. And so that's why when I bring on somebody new, like we just jam, like we're friends, like we have similar interests. I understand what they want for their life and their family and their team members. I understand how they want to serve their community.
Yeah.
Like I get that stuff. And it just absolutely overjoys me when I'm seeing them do the things that they talked about in life, whether it's taking a vacation with their kids and family, whether it's being able to take off instead of a week, they're taking off 4 weeks, just to build memories. The best present that you can build with your family are not gifts, but they're your presence, right? Yeah. And giving your family your eye attention. So that's what I want to gift people with my stewardship and with what I do. I just do it through business. Like business is a way that I serve people to help them build the life they desire, which I've said like 57 times, right? Yeah.
So recapping it all, what are like the main 5 or the main points that you want our listeners to take away today? Bring it home as far as like, if they want to continue working with you, where do they go? How do we continue this conversation? We know that this is not going to be the last conversation about business or branding. So definitely like stay connected in what we are creating here. But in all, what's a recap and how do we work with you?
Number one, understand that money model that I talked about at the very beginning, and wanting to graduate from owns a job to owning a system.
Yeah.
Let's graduate from here to there. We'll talk about the rest later. Number 2 is like, understand that if you're a business owner and you're operating at all the levels of the economic value level, that you are significantly undercutting your opportunity for impact in your own legacy and the community.
Yeah.
Right. And then number 3 is if you understand that everything starts with leadership, and that's leading yourself. And the better you are a leader to yourself, you can lead your team. And when you are a better leader that leads the right team, your team will grow, because right now people are hurting for team members that want to serve because they say they don't want to work. But I'm telling you, the right team members are out there. I help them find them because I'm helping that owner get what they want, but they have to have the right team on board. So we work through that too. Right. So it's that whole, I guess it's a total package of understanding what people want, business owners, putting in place the plans to get it, and then hiring the right team to help them amplify it.
That's so good. And we want to continue this. There's so many questions I have, and I'm looking forward to all these other episodes because Anthony and I can just be here all day. So we're like, okay, we're going to break down these topics in different settings and different episodes. But to continue the conversation tomorrow or the next day, how can people work with you?
Go hit up my website.
He has a website?
Yeah, I got a website. I'm important.
He's in the digital space.
Yeah, I'm in the digital space.
He exists?
Yeah, I mean, you were telling me, my buddy JD was telling me, like, you got to get a website. I'm like, I don't want a website. Like, it just exhausts me thinking about it. I just want to talk to people.
Yeah.
And well, what I've learned in the last 6 months, that having a website has actually allowed me to talk to like 8 or 9 different people just from having the website, having a digital presence. So go look at anthonyblanco.com. That's the easiest way to come check me out, see some things. And then I would tell you to go to my YouTube channel, but it's a baby podcast.
Nope,
so
go to the YouTube channel. We're still going to plug it.
Yeah. Look at me on Facebook and Instagram, and a little bit on LinkedIn, getting better at that. But first place I'd go is just the website to keep it clean. There is a little form fill, like if you're interested in learning more or scheduling some time. Yeah. So go to the website, click the little things that say like learn more or get in contact.
Yeah.
It'll send me an email and we'll connect.
Yeah. Make sure also too, before you head out, subscribe to the podcast.
Subscribe to the podcast.
Like,
I've heard that. I just was listening the other day to something. They're like, if you do, they said 90% of podcasts don't do more than 3 episodes.
exactly.
I'm at 3 episodes
and we're
right
moving
now.
forward.
All I got to do is have my 4th, and this is it.
This is it.
I'm in the top 10% of all podcasters.
Look, we're moving forward. But definitely follow the podcast. The coaching department is the podcast name.
Yes.
Authentic Media is my podcast, so definitely check that out. But yeah.
All right, let's go.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thanks for watching the Authentic Media Podcast YouTube. At Authentic Media Company, our mission is to help you develop an authentic brand so you can make the impact that you are called to make. If you got anything from today's episode, make sure you drop a comment down below. I'm interested to see what your takeaways are. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel so you can be the first to know when we drop our newest episode. In the meantime, have a great day.